Think about your morning routine. You woke up, maybe glanced at a cereal box, checked your phone, scrolled through a news article perhaps, or maybe even picked up an actual physical book.
Yeah.
In that, short span, you've consumed countless words, but did you actually see them? Or did they just, well, exist?
That's a great point. It's this seemingly invisible force, isn't it, shaping how we take in information.
Exactly. And that's the topic of our deep dive today. Typography.
It truly is the silent architect of our daily lives. I mean, from the brand name on your favorite snack to the critical dosage on a medicine bottle, typography is everywhere.
Right.
And it's often intentionally designed to be unnoticed, yet it's profoundly effective in, well, guiding our eyes and our understanding.
That really highlights how much is happening beneath the surface, doesn't it? Our mission today, then, is to pull back that curtain a bit. We're going to unpack what typography is, what it isn't, and why it's such a critical, often silent partner in communication.
And we're drawing from some pretty comprehensive guides on using type in graphic design, right?
Absolutely. We're extracting practical wisdom and, honestly, some surprising insights that will, I promise you, fundamentally change how you look at every sign, book, and screen you encounter from now on.
And, this isn't just a deep dive for designers. Not at all. Understanding typography makes you a more informed observer of the world around you.
That's true.
You'll start to recognize the subtle signals that influence how you perceive information, whether it's like a breaking news headline or just a restaurant menu. It's about appreciating the immense craft behind truly effective communication.
Yeah.
So get ready for some serious aha moments that will definitely reframe how you experience the written word.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with what seems like a simple question. What is typography? I mean, it's often simplistically defined as the art or practice of arranging letters and words.
Right.
But that feels a bit, well, vague, doesn't it? What kind of letters? And what exactly does arranging entail here?
You're right to question that simplicity. It's much deeper. At its core, typography is about how letters and words are arranged, their composition relative to each other, their precise position within a broader design.
Okay.
It's the intentional choice of fonts, the specific spacing you apply, their size, and how all these decisions fundamentally affect how we read and interpret the message. It's truly a silent language, constantly at work.
And what's fascinating here is that designers talk about typography on two distinct levels. There's macro typography and micro typography.
Yeah, that's a key distinction.
Macro is the holistic, the big picture view, thinking about the entire page layout, the overall composition, column structures, how text interacts with images. It's about the overall flow and visual balance.
While microtypography dives deep into the intricate details, the almost invisible elements, really.
Such as?
Or we're talking about the specific typeface choice.
Yeah.
The sizes of individual characters, the precise letter spacing and word spacing, the exact length of lines leading, which is the line spacing ligatures, small caps, drop caps. Yeah, mastering these fine details, these micro elements, is what truly elevates a design. You really can't have one without the other for truly exceptional work. The macro guides the eye, sure, but the micro ensures the content is comfortably readable and feels right.
So once we understand what it is, the next step is actually seeing it. And that's often harder than it sounds because, like you said, typography is all around us. Often by design, it's intended to be invisible.
Exactly. Think about that snack wrapper you mentioned earlier. We just take it for granted, don't we? That the branding, the nutritional content, every single word has been meticulously designed.
Yeah, you don't really think about it.
It's a concept beautifully articulated by Beatrice Ward back in 1932. Her famous lecture, The Crystal Goblet. She argued that good typography should be like a crystal goblet for wine, transparent.
Invisible.
Right, invisible, allowing you to focus on the content, the wine, not the vessel itself. And for continuous reading, like a novel, this holds absolutely true. You don't want to be distracted by the font. You want to be lost in the story.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. While the crystal goblet analogy works perfectly for a novel, it's not universal, is it?
No, not at all.
I mean, imagine you're at a bustling airport. You need to notice the typography on signs to navigate effectively.
Absolutely.
It still needs to be clear and not distracting, of course, but it must be conspicuous enough to guide you quickly and efficiently. So sometimes typography needs to be seen to do its job.
Exactly. And this leads us to the idea that we kind of read before we read. Even if we don't consciously see the specific typeface or spacing, we read the overall layout, the composition, the use of color, the typeface selection, the size.
Right.
All these design signals are absorbed before we even delve into the actual content. They create our first impressions, guide our emotions, and subtly influence our perception of, say, quality or trustworthiness.
Developing this typographic awareness takes time, then. It's not something you learn overnight.
Definitely not.
But it sounds incredibly rewarding. You have to actively engage with it, almost like training your eye to see beyond the obvious.
It means adopting diverse ways of thinking for different problems. It's about seeking out good examples, making careful observations, and asking specific questions. What typeface is that? How many words are in that column? What size and line spacing are they using? Is there a visible grid system at play here?
And you won't always find immediate answers, I guess.
No, that's where the detective work begins. You might consult type specimen books, online resources, or even, print out text at various sizes and compare them to your observations to really feel the subtle differences.
Right.
Emil Reuter, the renowned Swiss typographer, put it perfectly. Typography has one plain duty before it, and that is to convey information in writing. No argument or consideration can absolve typography from this duty.
That's quite definitive.
It is. And he also noted that good typography is readily accepted. It just becomes part of the experience. While bad typography is often invisible, even to its own creators, it simply fails to deliver its promise.
So if that's what typography is, this intentional arrangement for replication, let's try and nail down what it isn't. The defining factor, the core principle you mentioned, is that typography allows for the arrangement of letters and words and other visual matter to be reassembled and replicated as needed, always bound by the constraints of the medium or technology, whether that's print or the internet.
And this is where Johannes Gutenberg's pivotal invention in the mid-15th century in Mainz, Germany, comes in. His development of movable metal type combined with the printing press. Well, it meant that text could be printed, dismantled, and then recomposed for subsequent print runs.
That was absolutely revolutionary, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. Because it allowed for multiple, easier, quicker, and significantly less expensive copies than the painstaking handwritten manuscripts that were the norm before. This shift from unique individual creation to systematic, repeatable production is typography's defining characteristic.
So typography, at its heart, it's a technical subject then. It thrives on consistency and proven methods, almost like a carefully honed craft.
Yeah, very much so. In many ways, early Western typography simply mechanized formal handwriting. And its relationship to language is fascinating. It uses signs, our letters, to represent spoken and written language.
Right.
Letters themselves are signs for sound, but they only gain meaning when they form words. Other typographic signs, like symbols, think of an at or sign or a %cent sign, they don't even have a spoken utterance in language, yet they communicate clearly within the system.
Now, for what typography isn't, it is definitively not unique, individually produced letters. That's the key distinction you're saying.
Absolutely. We're talking about separating typography from handwriting, from intricate lettering, from hand-carving letters into stone or wood, from personalized sign writing, from raw graffiti, or even from making letters out of, say, rubber bands.
Right. The key differentiator is that typography does not involve producing letters uniquely and individually each time by hand or by tool. It is fundamentally about systematic replication, repeatable, reusable forms designed to be reproduced.
Yet the boundaries are constantly evolving, aren't they? Think about stencils, rubber stamps, or even potato printing. These can be rearranged and replicated, blurring the lines a bit.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, that's why it's crucial to develop a personal view based on your knowledge and experience, and crucially, to be open to that view changing as you gain more understanding. The field is always adapting to new technologies.
And once you're bitten by the typographic bug, as the saying goes, it becomes impossible to ignore, apparently.
Oh, it really does. You'll start noticing tiny details everywhere. The precise spacing or kerning on newspaper headlines, incorrect apostrophes, or those ubiquitous default typefaces that suddenly make you sigh.
Huh. Okay.
But you'll also delight at correctly considered leading, the subtle spacing between lines that just makes text feel effortless. That's a sure sign you're developing your typographic sensibilities.
Okay, so to help listeners kickstart this journey of observation, you mentioned a sort of task, design task 1, looking at type.
Yeah, exactly. We encourage you to become an active observer. Over the course of a day, act as a typographic detective. Document what you see, maybe use your phone's camera, or just make notes on paper.
And the crucial part is?
The crucial part is, as you collect your observations, reflect on what kind of design you're seeing. Is it a flashy brand logo or pure informational design like a bus schedule? And most importantly, try to discern. Is it lettering unique, hand-drawn forms, or is it typography elements designed for systematic reproduction?
Give us an example.
Sure. A cereal packet, for instance, might have elaborate unique lettering on the front for the brand name, but the nutritional information on the back is almost certainly pure typography.
Got it.
Then choose 2 examples from your collection. They could be excellent or surprisingly problematic, and analyze their typography in more detail. Can you identify the typefaces? Does the typography communicate successfully? And importantly, why or why not? Maybe discuss your findings with others.
That sounds like a great exercise.
It is. This simple exercise will help you tune your eye and begin distinguishing the nuances between lettering and typography, making the invisible visible.
So you've started seeing typography in the wild. Now let's talk about its secret language. Like any specialized field, typography has its own unique terminology. Learning it isn't just about sounding smart, right? It genuinely helps your personal understanding, allows you to communicate effectively with other designers, and truly elevates your appreciation for the craft.
It's true. You'll encounter words you've never heard before, but also familiar words that take on entirely new meanings. For example, have you ever heard a typographer complain about orphans, widows, or rivers in a text?
I'm picturing a sad child or a flowing stream. What exactly do those mean in the world of type? That sounds intriguing.
Great question. An orphan is basically a single word or a very short line of text left dangling at the top of a new column or page. It looks isolated and awkward. A widow is similar, but it's a short line ending a paragraph that gets stranded at the bottom of a column, separated from the rest of its paragraph.
Both sound undesirable.
They are. Both break the visual flow and can distract the reader. And rivers are those unintentional, distracting streams of white space that can appear to run through a justified block of text. Your eye keeps getting caught in them, making it harder to read. They're all subtle imperfections that a typographer strives to eliminate.
That immediately gives me a clear picture. And I know typeface anatomy uses some quirky names too, like ears and beaks. These terms often come from the historical practice of metal type, right?
Exactly. Much of this terminology has a long history, even if its literal meaning doesn't perfectly apply to digital type today. Take kern, for instance. Historically, it referred to a physical part of a metal letter that overhung its body.
Right.
Today, it's the individual adjustment of space between specific letters in software to make them visually harmonious, like nudging a T closer to an A, so they look perfectly aligned, not too gappy.
And another interesting pair I've heard are ligatures and diphthongs. They both involve conjoined characters, but what's the difference there?
Well, ligatures like phi or L are primarily designed to solve visual awkwardness when certain letters combine, stopping them from crashing into each other. Crucially, they don't change the pronunciation of the combined letters.
Okay.
A diphthong, however, like A or A, actually indicates a specific sound change in language. It's a subtle but important distinction that shows how closely typography is tied to language itself.
It's fascinating how deep the history goes.
It really is. As Jan Tschichold, a huge figure in typography, stated, all typography implies tradition and conventions. Tradition means handing over, delivering up, legacy, education, guidance. It's this continuous line of knowledge being passed down.
It's also worth noting, isn't it, that while typography is a discipline in itself, it's also a specialism embedded within other professions.
Definitely. Graphic designers, web developers, filmmakers, they all use typography, but their typo language might differ slightly depending on their specific field and focus. So understanding these common terms really helps bridge those gaps and ensures everyone's speaking the same visual language, more or less.
Beyond language, typography also has its own unique systems of measurement. We're moving beyond just inches or millimeters here to achieve incredible precision.
Yeah, we need specific units. The most common and smallest unit is the point, often abbreviated as P. Think of it as a tiny building block of type.
And its origin?
Its invention traces back to French clergyman Sébastien Truchet and type founder Pierre-Simon Fournier in the 18th century. Later, François-Ambroise Didot adapted it to be roughly 172 of an inch, around 1780.
So it's a standard unit now across the digital world. Is it consistent everywhere?
Thankfully, yes. There was some confusion early on with French versus British inches, but today, the postscript point, or DTP point, is standardized globally for computers. So one point is 0.353 millimeters everywhere, ensuring consistency, which simplifies collaboration immensely.
Then we have the pica. How does that fit in? Is it related?
It is. The pica is another specific typographic unit. basically a larger grouping of points. 12 points make 1 pica.
Okay.
This gives designers a more convenient unit for measuring things like column widths or margins. So 6 picas make 1 inch. If you've ever seen a composing stick from traditional letterpress printing, you'll see the pica gauge used for setting lines of type by hand.
And finally, we have the M, or code, and M. These sound like really old school terms.
They certainly are. Historically, an M was a space unit in lead type, equivalent to the size of the body of the associated type, often tied to the height and width of the uppercase M.
And today?
Today, the M unit is still used, but it's relative to the current type size. So if your type is 12 feet, an M space is 12 feet wide. Divisions of the M are still used in software for adjusting letter spacing. An N, as you might guess, is simply half the width of an M.
So they're relative units.
Exactly. And these relative units are incredibly powerful for maintaining consistent spacing regardless of type size changes.
It sounds like a lot of specialized measurements. Do designers typically mix these systems with regular units like millimeters?
They do, quite often. Designers frequently combine measurement systems. For instance, they might specify page sizes in metric units like millimeters for print production, but then use typographic units like points and picas for the type matter itself, for the text and headings.
But it's not all about the numbers, is it?
Absolutely not. No amount of precise measuring replaces the designer's eye. Ultimately, the eye will ultimately be the judge for visual fit. Typography deals with visual matter, and if it doesn't look right, if it's not aesthetically balanced and harmonious, it doesn't work right, no matter how perfectly measured it might be.
So with this new language of typography in our toolkit, we're ready to start thinking like a typographer. And just like any great journey, that begins not with the first step necessarily, but with a solid plan.
That's right.
So let's talk about preparing to use type, which is all about understanding the design problem at its core, right?
Exactly. Think of it like being a detective, maybe. Before you even touch a font, you need to ask, what exactly is the mystery I'm trying to solve here? Is your design for print or digital? Have you truly understood the brief, the client's needs, the ultimate purpose? How will you reach your design destination?
Yeah.
Without understanding the problem clearly, you really can't craft an effective solution. You're just guessing.
That's a great way to put it. It highlights a crucial point. Design ultimately strives to produce solutions in answer to problems that have been set. It's not just about problem solving, because design is inherently subjective, meaning there's always more than one valid answer, potentially. But it's about deeply understanding what's being asked.
And resisting the urge sometimes to make a personal artistic statement that might overshadow the client's actual objective. The best design connects form and communication seamlessly, with both functioning equally well.
And that leads us straight into content and context, the actual message and its setting. It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? While it's impossible to completely remove your personality from the act of designing, objectivity is absolutely key.
It is. The designer must be acutely aware of what's being asked, how they approach their work, and what cultural or societal factors might inform their practice, and how the work might be received. It's a constant balancing act between the words themselves, where they'll appear, and the visual form they ultimately take.
Speaking of balance, a truly critical consideration is the audience. Who are you talking to? You need to ask yourself some really specific questions.
Like what?
Like, who specifically will read or see this work? Where will it primarily be seen? A bustling street, a quiet library, maybe a phone screen. What will it be used for? A fleeting ad, a complex legal document, or perhaps a children's storybook?
Identifying your intended audience is absolutely paramount. It's essential for the communication success and for guiding your design decisions. Anticipating how your audience will perceive your work takes time to develop as a designer, but it should never, ever be underestimated.
Right.
Some audiences, for instance, expect conformity to visual orthodoxy. Think of legal documents or scientific journals. They need to look a certain way. Others might want to be guided, challenged, thrilled, or entertained.
Yeah.
The designer's job is to meet these expectations for the client and for the client's clients, ensuring the message resonates effectively.
This all boils down to appropriateness, then perhaps the most important consideration when planning any project. Developing an awareness of appropriateness means thinking deeply about the content, the context, the form, its ultimate use, the audience, and even how your own creative choices might be perceived.
It leads to asking very useful questions that act as a kind of checklist for integrity. What am I doing? Why am I doing it this way? Who is it for? How might it be perceived or used? Answering these questions helps you engage more critically with the design problem itself. And appropriateness doesn't mean your work has to be dry or boring. Not at all. Rather, it leads to integrity and honesty in your work. It feels right for the job.
I love this analogy I read. Your design shouldn't turn up to the party in a chicken suit when the invitation is for black tie only.
Haha, that's perfect. So using antique or novelty fonts for a serious architecture conference, or setting a critical public notice in something playful like Comic Sans, would be fundamentally inappropriate, no matter how visually creative it might seem in isolation.
Exactly. The final question we must always ask ourselves is, design for whom, and how will that design be useful?
That principle should guide every single decision you make in the preparatory stage, ensuring your typography is always serving its purpose effectively.
So we've laid the groundwork, we know our audience, our content, and the context. Now let's get into planning your work, which is about creating that blueprint for creation. It's often an overlooked aspect, especially for new designers, maybe.
I think so, yeah. But knowing that technical production and process considerations can actually spark and significantly aid conceptual development.
Really? How so?
Well, practicality is essential for designers to realize their conceptual work effectively. Understanding the methods, materials, and processes involved can even drive creative work, opening up new possibilities you might not have considered otherwise. It's about connecting the what-if with the how-to, enabling your wild ideas to become tangible realities.
Okay, that makes sense. Next up, page plans. These can range from simple thumbnail sketches for a single page to more ordered flat plans that map out the number and sequence of pages in a larger publication, like a book or magazine.
Thumbnail sketches are incredibly helpful because they allow for quick production and give clear guidance for design development, things like the composition of text and image, margins, symmetry or asymmetry, how elements are grouped. Just rough ideas.
And flat plans.
Flat plans, on the other hand, provide a crucial overview of all pages in a larger project. They help you break down big jobs into manageable sections, considering things like color consistency across chapters or even different paper stocks being used. They're essential for efficient typographic practice, helping you forecast how a large job will behave and appear before you commit hours to detailed design.
This planning extends to impositions, which you describe as printing's hidden order. If your work is being reproduced in large quantities, say for a print run of over 1,000 copies, it will likely be printed on a commercial printing press, not just your desktop printer.
Right. And an imposition is how your final design pages are arranged on large single-printed sheets. This arrangement ensures that when the sheets are folded, gathered, and trimmed, they form the correctly paginated final product, a book, a brochure, or whatever it is.
So the pages aren't printed in 1, 2, 3 order on the big sheet?
Not usually. No. Impositions normally consist of multiples of 4 pages, like 4, 8, 16, 32, or 64, determined by the size of the printed sheet relative to your design page size. For example, if you design an A4 brochure and the printer uses a large SRA2 sheet, 4 of your A4 pages might appear on each side of that large sheet, maybe pages 1854 on one side and 2763 on the other, so when folded correctly, they sequence properly. Knowing this hidden structure ensures your pages align perfectly when the booklet is finished.
Knowing about impositions, how pages back each other in sequence, can actually open up new creative possibilities, can't it?
It absolutely can. It allows you to refine your design approach by considering different formats, papers, inks, special finishes, and bindings right from the start, truly integrating form with function and production realities.
Okay. That leads us directly into selecting formats for work considerations of size and proportion. The ultimate determinant for your page format is the size of the paper the finished design will print on, you said.
Exactly. You need to know your production method before selecting your format, because what's feasible on a digital screen might not be cost-effective or even possible in print.
And it goes beyond just aesthetics, right?
It does. Thoughtful format choices can also help reduce material waste, which is a subtle yet important consideration in responsible design. And proportion is key here. We have common aesthetically pleasing proportions like the golden section, roughly 1 to 1.618, the root 2 rectangle, roughly 1 to 1.414, famously used in ISO A sizes like A4, A3, etc., and other classical ratios like 1.2, 5.9, 3.5, 2.3, and 3.4.
The ISO A sizes are particularly clever, aren't they?
They are fantastic. Used globally except mainly in the USA and Canada, the ISO standard maintains a uniform aspect ratio. Each time you fold an A-size sheet in half along its longer side, it creates a new A-size that retains the exact same proportion.
Ah, so A4 folded becomes A5 with the same shape.
Precisely. This means you can scale designs up or down effortlessly without needing to adjust margins or content. In contrast, the US system alternates ratios, meaning you can't simply reduce or magnify from one format to the next without leaving vacant margins or cropping content awkwardly.
This attention to size and proportion is also crucial for the user experience, I imagine.
Definitely. Books designed for holding need thoughtful size, proportion, and page count for comfortable use, something that feels natural in the hand. Posters, too, need to be sized appropriately for both far and close reading, especially when considering specific sites like bus shelters or underground trains where there are fixed dimensions and varying viewing distances. Every element should feel intentional.
Once we've done all that meticulous planning, it's time for production, bringing typography to life. This is where your designs start to become tangible, physical things.
And a crucial step in that tangibility is creating dummies and mock-ups. As designers, we create mock-ups that can convincingly mimic the final product, often using the correct text, appropriate fonts, exact colors, maybe even the intended paper.
It's quite different from architects, say.
Yeah, unlike architects who wouldn't typically build life-size models of entire buildings just for a preview, they rely more on blueprints and scale models. Designers need that tangible preview because it's so close to the real thing. It helps you feel the weight, see the scale.
But there's a subtle danger in how real these mock-ups can look, isn't there?
There is. Designers sometimes get so caught up in the convincing appearance that they neglect to ask deeper production questions. Things like, what exact printing process will be used? Offset litho? Digital? What types of inks are compatible with that paper? How will the folding or binding be specified accurately? What specific materials are even available and affordable for this production run?
So it's vital to understand the process.
Just as an architect needs to understand construction, materials, and building regulations down to the last bolt, a designer needs to understand the production process. This knowledge is power. It ensures your vision can be realized effectively and efficiently, saving headaches and costs down the line. It's about translating the aesthetic into the practical.
And the very foundation of most printed production is paper. We call them substrates, essentially, any material used for printing on, but predominantly paper or board. While our desktop printers favor bright white paper, much of the subtle qualities and tactile nature of truly fine paper are lost in that context, I find.
Oh, completely. Paper selection can genuinely make or break a design, completely altering its perceived value and feel. You need to consider its color. Is it brilliant white, natural cream? Its tactile qualities is smooth, textured, rough, and its weight.
How is weight measured?
It's often specified in grams per square meter, GSM, for paper, or sometimes in microns for thicker boards. Then there's the crucial distinction between coated and uncoated paper.
What's the difference there?
Coated paper is typically smooth and flat, often treated with China clay. This improves its opacity, stops ink soaking in too much, improves color absorption, and enhances the luster of the printed image. It comes in finishes from matte to high gloss, giving images a vibrant pop.
And uncoated.
Uncoated paper, on the other hand, has a more natural, sometimes slightly rougher feel and produces less glare, which is fantastic for text contrast. Many continuous reading books, like novels, use off-white or cream uncoated papers because they're gentler on the eyes and make for a more comfortable, warmer reading experience.
Good tip.
Yeah, and a pro tip here, start building a physical library of paper samples from suppliers so you can literally feel the difference. It makes a huge impact on your choices.
Next, inks. Our desktop laser and inkjet printers give us rapid, inexpensive proofs, which are great for quick checks. But for large quantities, say over 500 copies, you're likely looking at offset lithography, a commercial printing process.
Right. And on a desktop printer, the software gives you a composite color result, mixing its own inks. But for commercial print, colors need to be specified much more precisely.
That's where CMYK comes in, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or key, as it's called.
Exactly. These are overprinted in tiny dots using percentages to create virtually any composite color. Alternatively, you might specify spot, solid, or special colors, like those in the globally recognized Pantone matching system, or PMS.
Why use spot colors?
Well, these are individual inks mixed with specific pigments that are often difficult to achieve accurately or consistently with CMYK, especially very bright or metallic colors.
Interesting.
Using a limited color palette, say a two-color design with one spot color in black, can be incredibly effective not just aesthetically but also economically, because fewer printing plates are needed for offset litho, which reduces setup costs. It forces creativity and often leads to more impactful, focused designs.
And once the ink is on the paper, we consider print finishing. These are the options impossible to simulate on desktop printers, adding that final polish that really elevates the design.
Yeah, we're talking metallic inks that shimmer, overprinting layers for depth, laminations for durability or texture, varnishes for shine or protection, foil blocking for a luxurious metallic touch, intricate folding, creasing to help folding thicker stock, embossing or debossing for raised or indented effects, or precise die cutting for unique shapes.
Wow, lots of options.
Definitely. You can't learn all these processes overnight, but it's incredibly useful to know they exist and what they can achieve. A great way to learn is by contacting local printing firms. They're often very generous with their knowledge and can show you samples of what's possible.
But with a word of caution.
Always. Don't use these bells and whistles just to compensate for poor underlying design. Thoughtful, appropriate selection enhances a good design. It doesn't fix a bad one. Use them with purpose.
Finally, for production, we need binding the process of gathering and fastening those loose printed sheets, or signatures as they're called, in the correct order, usually with a cover. This is crucial for any multi-page design, transforming a stack of papers into a cohesive book or brochure.
Yeah, and standard forms include saddle stitching, which is basically like stapling through the fold. It's common for publications up to about 80 pages, like thin magazines or booklets. While simple and cost-effective, they won't have a flat spine for printing a title on.
Okay. What else?
Then there's perfect binding, where pages are glued together at the spine edge and a cover is wrapped around and attached. This is very common for magazines, thicker brochures, and paperbacks. It gives that clean, square spine you can print on.
And for hardback books?
For hardback books, you'll typically see case binding. Here, the signatures, the folded groups of pages, are often sewn together for incredible strength and durability, and then special end papers are glued to attach this text block to a rigid hard case or cover. While perfect bound blocks can be cased, they're generally less durable than sewn ones.
Are there other types?
Oh yes, many others. Things like wire or spiral binding, comb binding, side stitching, lay-flat binding for cookbooks or manuals, tape binding. Each is chosen for specific aesthetic or functional needs, and all require careful attention and research for your specific project to ensure it works correctly and looks good.
Now that we've produced our work theoretically, we need to talk about bringing order to the page itself. This is where grid systems come into play. Their primary purpose is to aid in organizing text and image, giving a design order, structure, clarity, hierarchy, accuracy, and often a distinct visual identity. Think of it as the silent framework holding everything together.
It's true that not all typographic designs require a grid, and many successful ones don't use them, especially very artistic or expressive pieces where breaking free is the point. However,
Yes.
for anyone learning, a grid provides an invaluable guide to proportion and accuracy, essentially, a safety net to stop things looking messy. For expert designers, it evolves into a methodological framework for creativity, a foundation upon which they can experiment and innovate with confidence.
So what is a grid, visually speaking? What are we actually talking about?
In most cases, it's a set of drawn lines, often invisible in the final product, marking where text and image should appear. This includes margins, columns, and gutters, the spaces between columns. A grid can be as simple as a single text area, or as complex as a multi-column or modular system.
And for the reader?
For the reader, the grid should remain invisible, like much of good typographic practice. It's not meant to be a straitjacket, restricting creativity. A grid is flexible. It can, and sometimes should, be broken or adjusted if the design demands it. The goal is always to allow your design to flourish, not to create monotony. It guides, it doesn't dictate.
Looking back, there are traditional grids that influenced early typography even before the term was common.
Yeah, these weren't grids as we think of them today, perhaps, but rather subtle guides for margin and text proportions found in early manuscripts and printed books, like the Gutenberg Bible.
Right.
They were about creating harmonious page proportions.
Right.
Later, typographers like Jan Chickhold developed Canon's principles for proportions like 2.3 and 3.4, adaptable to various formats, designed to create a visually pleasing and balanced reading experience based on historical precedent.
These principles are very similar to the golden section, aren't they, with its ratio of roughly 1 to 1.618?
They are, and that ratio also appears in the Fibonacci sequence through ratios like 3.5 or 5.8. This ratio has been observed in nature and art for centuries, often perceived as subconsciously pleasing. Interestingly, common formats like the Dine A series, which use the 1 to 1.414 ratio, are often mistakenly associated with the golden section, highlighting the power and sometimes the confusion around these underlying proportional systems.
Then came the modern grids, an evolution driven by early modernist art and design schools in Europe. People like Le Corbusier.
Exactly. Le Corbusier's modular system, based on the golden section and human anatomy, things like human height, raised arm, solar plexus, was applied to everything from architecture to the printed page, seeking universal harmony.
But it was the Swiss who really formalized it for graphic design.
Absolutely. It was the groundbreaking work from Zurich, Basel, and Ulm in the 1950s and 60s, a movement known as Swiss typography that truly influenced the world to incorporate grid systems into graphic design systematically. Designers like Joseph Müller-Brockmann and Karl Gerstner developed manifestos and theories of the grid, seeing it not just as a visual guide, but as a program or holistic discipline for problem solving. It became a systematic approach to clarity and objectivity.
It's important to remember, though, that the use of grids in typographic design must relate directly to both the content and context.
Yes, while it's usually introduced early in the design process, it needs to remain flexible. The grid should guide, not constrain, the design. There's a constant interplay between the overall concept, typeface choice, and line length, which in turn influences column widths. The design always takes priority, and the grid is there to serve it, not the other way around.
There are different types of grid to suit various needs, offering a flexible toolkit for designers. What are the main ones?
Well, simple typographic grids might just consist of vertical columns, gutters, the space between columns, and page margins. You can even have narrower subcolumns within wider ones for greater flexibility, allowing for different matter and pace within your design, like placing a caption or a small image in a narrow column next to a main text block in a wider one.
And then there are modular grids, which are strongly associated with Swiss typography.
Right. These divide space both vertically and horizontally, creating a series of cells. The depth of these cells can even be based on the text type size, and leading, say, 10 lines of 10-put type on 12-put leading creates a 120-put deep cell module, so your design elements align perfectly with your text rhythm. These cells are spaced by gutters in both directions, creating a highly organized, almost architectural structure on the page.
You also mentioned symmetry.
Yes, you have symmetric grids, which might be centrally located on a single page with equal left and right margins, or more commonly, mirrored symmetrically across facing pages in a publication.
And the opposite.
Asymmetric grids have an off-center appearance on single pages or spreads. They aren't mirrored, but rather might be repeated in a single, consistent position from page to page, creating a dynamic, often more modern feel. In both symmetric and asymmetric designs, the precise relationship of the margins is critical to success in achieving balance.
For even finer control, especially over line spacing and text alignment across columns, designers use baseline grids. What exactly is that?
A baseline grid adds another layer of horizontal lines. This grid's lines are spaced according to the leading value of your main body text type. So if you're using 12-page leading for your body text, your baseline grid would be set at 12-page intervals down the page.
And the benefit.
This is particularly beneficial for consistency and accuracy, especially with large amounts of text or multiple columns. It makes cross-alignment, ensuring the baselines of text align perfectly across adjacent columns, an easier and more accurate task. It creates a beautiful, rhythmic, visual harmony.
Software helps with this.
Oh yes, industry-standard software like InDesign automates snapping text baselines to the grid, simplifying the process immensely. The reason you base it on the leading of your text type is that text forms the bulk of your content, and optically aligning small type by hand across columns is incredibly difficult and time-consuming.
Can other elements align to it?
They can. Other elements like running heads or headings can align to this grid too, often using multiples or divisions of the text leading. For example, a heading with 24-put leading would align perfectly to every second line of a 12-put baseline grid. It's truly a virtual typographic safety net, guiding your text rhythm without dictating the overall design aesthetic.
Okay, so to put this into practice, here's an idea for design task 2. Find the grid. Your task is to become a grid detective. Find 3 different examples of design work around you. It could be a book, a newspaper, a magazine, maybe even a brand's corporate identity guide if you can find one.
Right. Once you've found them, try to see the invisible grid. You might need to use tracing paper over a page, or simply sketch it out by eye. Can you discern the margins, the number and approximate widths of the columns, the spaces, the gutters between them?
And look for structure.
Exactly. Is the grid symmetric or asymmetric? Does it seem to use a modular, cell-like structure or just simple columns? The goal isn't to perfectly recreate it with measurements, but to train your eye to recognize the underlying structure that brings order.
Any tips for finding it?
Well, if you're only seeing blocks of text and images, try to look between them for the invisible lines and repetitions that unify the design. Check for consistency across multiple pages and whether elements are mirrored on facing pages. This task helps you understand how designers employ grids effectively, because remember, grid systems provide that flexible, invisible framework that brings order and clarity to typographic design.
We've built the foundation and mapped the page. Now let's get into the heart of it. Working with type, which often breaks down into two main realms: text typography and display typography.
That's right. And this brings together both macro and micro considerations we talked about, from the overall composition down to the fine details of legibility, spacing, and size.
Let's start with text typography. This is truly the unseen workhorse of design, isn't it?
It really is. Its primary purpose is continuous reading, and most of us take it entirely for granted when it's done well. The key characteristic of good text typography is that it should be essentially invisible. It shouldn't distract the reader from the content itself. Type designers intentionally avoid conspicuous, overly decorative type for this purpose.
As a general guide, text type for continuous reading usually falls between, 8p and 14p, though this can vary a bit depending on the typeface's actual design and how large it appears optically.
Yeah, and captions might be smaller, maybe around 6 feet. Anything much above 14 feet typically becomes difficult for continuous reading, as our eyes have to travel too far to absorb each word comfortably.
So when selecting a text typeface, what are the absolute priorities?
Readability and legibility are paramount for lengthy texts, number one. And you need to look at the subtle visual characteristics.
Yeah.
Does it have a good X height? The height of the lowercase x, which makes it easily readable? Are the counters and bowls, the enclosed spaces within letters like O or P, clearly visible and open? Are the ascenders and descenders well considered to create distinct word shapes?
Anything else?
Is the relationship between thick and thin strokes balanced? Is the overall width appropriate for comfortable reading? Is the weight suitable? Most importantly, testing is crucial. Don't rely solely on how it looks on your screen. Print it out, produce hard copies. Even small differences have big effects on the overall design's readability and feel.
You also need to think about audience appropriateness too, right?
Absolutely. A children's book shouldn't use tiny, overly decorative fonts that are hard for young eyes, just as a serious philosophy book shouldn't be set in a playful, informal style like, say, a comic book font. Avoid letting personal taste or clever font names dictate your choices. As Paul Beaujean, who was actually Beatrice Ward writing under a pseudonym, famously said, "Type, the voice of the printed page, can be legible and dull, or legible and fascinating, according to its design and treatment." The challenge is to make it legible and fascinating, but never distracting from the message.
Okay, so in stark contrast to text typography, we have display typography, the attention grabber.
Exactly. Its purpose is not for reading at length. Instead, it's designed to draw attention, act as signposting, create clarity, establish hierarchy, and bring order to a design. It can add immense character, inform, enthrall, entertain, or even purposefully confuse, depending on the intended message.
This is often considered macro typography, focusing on the overall typographic image, the visual impact it creates, though micro adjustments are still sometimes needed to perfect it, I assume.
Oh, definitely. Kerning, for instance, becomes even more critical at large sizes. Display type can become image-like itself, almost a piece of art. It allows for much greater variation in personality than text types, and many well-designed text types can actually be enlarged successfully for display purposes.
Are there special versions for display?
Yes, interestingly, many text font families have specially drawn display or titling variants. These are designed specifically to look harmonious at larger sizes. They often have thinner stems or different ascender-descender lengths, or perhaps smaller serifs, to prevent them from appearing too heavy or bulky when scaled up significantly. They're crafted to sing at large sizes.
So if text types are the introverts, quietly doing their job,
Then display types are the extroverts, sometimes even the exhibitionists. They range from classical elegance to outright crassness, from sublime beauty to the utterly ridiculous. But this doesn't mean taste goes out the window.
no.
Not at all. Since display typography is often the most immediately noticeable aspect of a design, it requires equal or even more care than text typography. It's the first impression, the hook.
And you need to avoid cliches, I guess.
Please. A car mechanic's business card doesn't need a typeface assembled from spanners, for example. When selecting display type, you might be less concerned with things like X height or character width compared to text type, but you still absolutely need to test, experiment, and print out your options. Compare them to successful work without just mimicking, and always ensure appropriateness for the job, asking if it truly embodies the message and tone you want to convey.
So we've selected our type. Now let's see how it lives on the page. We're moving into typography and context, looking at the page as a canvas. The core arrangements typography deals with are words, lines, and paragraphs.
Right. Starting with words. Some research suggests we identify words by their overall outline or shape, especially when set in upper and lower case or sentence case. The varying heights of the X height, the ascenders, the descenders, they create distinctive forms that our brains recognize quickly.
Which is why
upper and lower case is generally much more readable than setting text in all caps for continuous reading. All caps create less recognizable, blocky, rectangular shapes and lose that natural reading rhythm that helps us flow through sentences.
that makes perfect sense. All caps are useful for display settings or titles, sure, or maybe very sparingly for emphasis in text, but they can look too large and shouty within a paragraph. Italic or small caps are often better choices for subtle emphasis within body text.
Exactly. And for display, single words or collections of words can truly breathe life into a design, creating powerful visual statements. But they require careful attention to size, weight, and especially letter spacing to make the right impact.
Okay, next, lines. Line length or measure defines the width of your text area or column, and you're saying this is absolutely crucial for readability.
Crucial. Lines that are too long make it hard for your eye to track back and locate the beginning of the next line accurately, leading to fatigue and losing your place. While lines that are too short break up and interrupt the text flow, forcing your eye to jump back and forth too frequently, which is also tiring.
Is there a sweet spot?
A good general guide for English is somewhere between 50 and 70 characters wide, which translates to approximately 8 to 12 words per line on average.
And line length can actually control reading speed and comprehension, you mentioned.
It can. Shorter lines, common in newspapers or magazines, allow for quicker digestion of information, as they fit more easily into a single eye span or fixation. Longer lines, as often found in books, encourage slower, more immersive reading, perfect for deeper engagement with complex content. And for an even visually pleasing line that doesn't disturb the eye, precise letter spacing and word spacing are absolutely key to creating that smooth texture.
Finally, paragraphs. How do they function differently?
Well, at larger display sizes, paragraphs often work almost as single lines of type, and the line spacing, is often reduced significantly, sometimes even becoming negative, to maintain their shape and visual impact as a cohesive unit.
And at text sizes?
At text sizes, paragraphs form a distinct visual block, a texture on the page. Their appearance is heavily affected by the chosen typeface, its size, the spacing within and between words, the line length, and the leading. Alignment also significantly impacts readability and the overall look. Many designers prefer text ranged left, or flush left, ragged right, for its consistent word spacing and clear left edge, which provides a fixed point for the reader's eye to return to easily.
How do you signal a new paragraph?
Usually separated with a line space, often the same as the leading or maybe half, or by an indent on the first line. If you indent, aim for the width of 1 which is the current type size, and generally the very first paragraph in a chapter or section shouldn't be indented unless it features a dramatic drop cap, which kind of handles that signal.
Okay, this brings us to the typographic area anatomy of the page. It's important to understand how typography is specifically applied to certain artifacts and the terminology used.
Right. A single page, particularly in bookwork, is often called a folio. Two facing pages together are a spread, or sometimes a double-page spread, DPS, especially common in magazine design, where two pages open up to form a continuous visual area.
And left versus right.
The left page is traditionally called the verso, and the right page is the recto.
In publication design, the page is typically divided into text and marginal areas. What are the margins called?
They have specific names. The head, top margin, foot, bottom margin, foredge, the outside edge away from the spine, and back, the inside margin by the spine or gutter. These margins aren't just empty space. They can contain supporting matter like notes, captions, running heads or footers, repeating titles or chapter names, and page numbers, which are also called folios. They also provide crucial white space, allowing the text to breathe and not feel crammed.
And for single-page designs like posters?
For single-page, unbound designs, we simply refer to left margin and right margin. The text area itself can be a single width, or elegantly divided into columns or cells, usually guided by an underlying grid system.
Is there a rule for margin proportions?
A broad rule for optical balance is that the foot margin is always proportionally larger than the others, especially the head margin. If the bottom margin is too small, the text block will appear to sag, looking visually too low on the page. Similarly, the optical center of a page is always slightly higher than its mathematical center because the exact mathematical center often appears too low visually. These subtle adjustments ensure a pleasing and balanced composition.
Now we're going to explore typography applications, looking at where type meets purpose in the real world. Let's start with the poster, which needs to communicate effectively, often from a distance.
Yeah, posters have very special considerations. You need to think about the audience, where they'll be seen, a busy street, a gallery wall, and crucially, from what distances they need to work.
So hierarchy is key.
Hierarchy and scale are critical. Typography on a poster must work on multiple levels. You need large, bold type to grab attention and draw in viewers from across a room or down the street.
Right.
If that same poster contains detailed information like event times or a contact phone number, overly large type can actually be less clear at close range. It becomes hard to read. It's a tricky balance. Grab attention from afar, ensure clarity up close.
Moving to identity, the face of an organization, we're often talking about corporate identity elements like letterheads and business cards.
Right. And here there's always a balance to strike between conforming to established conventions and norms for familiarity and professionalism and creating something fresh and new that stands out and reflects the brand's personality.
What are some practical considerations?
For letterheads, the paper often conforms to standard sizes like ISODIN A4 in Europe or USA Letter Canada P4 elsewhere. You need to allow for a filing margin, typically 20-25 millimeter on the left, and maybe ensure it folds correctly into various standard envelope formats so the address shows through a window if needed.
And business cards.
Business cards usually stick pretty closely to standard credit card sizes, roughly 55 by 85 millimeter. For sheer practicality, they need to fit easily into wallets and standard card holders. Form really does follow function here, even in these tiny details.
When it comes to book design, creating the reader's journey, there are some serious considerations for the proportion of marginal and text areas, with the nature of the content heavily influencing those decisions.
Definitely. Continuous text, like in novels, might be set in a single measure column, designed for comfortable, immersive reading over long periods, whereas larger, more complex books, like reference books or illustrated guides, could use multiple columns to break up information.
Why columns and reference books?
For information retrieval, like in dictionaries or encyclopedias, columns are absolutely standard because they facilitate quicker access and easier scanning down the page. Textbooks often employ comprehensive grid systems to accommodate varied content in complex text-image configurations, allowing for diagrams, sidebars, pull quotes, and other elements. Margins might even be minimized in some textbooks to prioritize information density.
And there's a specific structure to books.
Yeah, there's a typical traditional order to a book's construction elements, from the cover, end papers, bastard title page, frontispiece, main title page, copyright and print page, dedication, acknowledgments, forward, preface, contents, list of illustrations, introduction, half-title pages before sections, then the main body of text, followed by end matter like appendices, glossary, bibliography, index, and finally the back-end paper and cover. Though it's true that modern books often streamline much of the front material for efficiency.
Magazines and newspapers share some common attributes, like the use of multiple columns or modular grid cells to organize diverse content.
They do. Newspapers, even serious broadsheet-style papers, have increasingly adopted the smaller tabloid format simply for ease of handling.
How do they differ stylistically?
Well, popular tabloids often use space dramatically to grab attention, with huge, bold headlines, lots of images, and sometimes non-standard, attention-grabbing typography. Serious papers, however, tend to maintain a more rigorous formal approach. Limited heading sizes, formalized column widths, very text-intensive layouts, and minimal white space to convey authority and density of information.
And magazines?
Magazines often embrace white space much more. They prioritize their look and feel as much as their content, creating a dynamic interaction of text, display type, images, and space that can vary greatly from feature to feature, giving each magazine a distinct personality and rhythm.
For exhibition design, navigating physical space and information is the key challenge. You need to consider how visitors will interact with the information presented.
Yeah, think about the sequential flow of displays and even simple footfall, how people actually walk through a space. Content should generally be boiled down to the bare essentials and kept incredibly clear and concise. People often won't stand and read long blocks of text in an exhibition setting.
Visibility is crucial too.
Absolutely paramount. Ensure text is easily visible at an average eyeline height. Avoid small text sizes or certain color combinations, especially in dimly lit environments, which can make reading difficult or cause eye strain. Use size and hierarchy effectively to draw attention, but always be sympathetic to the content or the exhibits themselves, making sure the typography enhances rather than detracts from the overall experience.
Now, information design, where functionality is really king, this is often invisible design because we experience it when we're focused on doing something else, like finding directions on a map or understanding a data chart.
Exactly. The core considerations here are extreme readability and legibility. The text must never overpower the visualized information, like diagrams or charts. It should support and explain it clearly and unobtrusively.
Is there a specific type style preferred?
While clean sans serif types may often be chosen for a perceived neutral tone, they aren't exclusively fit for information design. Clarity is the absolute key, especially for things like wayfinding systems and signage, regardless of whether it's serif or sans serif. Consistency of style and size across the system and strong contrast between the typography and its background are vital for creating a clear, effective system that guides users effortlessly and without confusion.
Finally, web typography. Measurements here are typically different, right? We use pixels, px, and relative units like mzem for responsiveness across different screen sizes.
That's right. And there's been a significant shift toward content strategy, CS, in recent years, where the content itself drives the design choices, focusing on clarity and appropriateness. This is a move away from the early web's often designer-led approach that sometimes prioritized flashy visuals over actual readability and usability.
Has control improved for web typographers?
Massively. Control has greatly increased, bringing web typography much closer to sophisticated print standards. Much of what's considered good print typographic practice, using tables for data, employing grid systems, using dynamic content generation, is migrating effectively to the web.
And CSS.
Cascading style sheets, CSS, allow for separate coded files that define the visual styling, offering much greater control and flexibility over typography than older methods like inline tags within the HTML. The future is even richer with formats like the Web Open Font format, WOFF, which allows font embedding directly into websites, enabling a truly enhanced and consistent typographic experience across different browsers and devices using almost any font imaginable.
So we've covered the various applications. Now let's explore type arrangement, the art of composition. This is where the real design magic happens, making the right choices for your specific artifact and content. You have to start by asking yourself, do I truly understand the content? Can I make sense of what needs to be communicated beyond just the literal words?
Exactly. And then you'll consider formal schemes. Should the design feel traditional, modern, or maybe even postmodern? Should it be symmetric or asymmetric? Will you employ a strict grid system or break from it intentionally? Identifying an overall approach helps guide your decision-making, though sometimes the content demands a completely unique response.
It's not just about style then.
No, remember, typographic design is not a question of appropriating style. It must serve in communicating meaning. The form should always serve the message, not just look cool for its own sake.
You also need to think about spatial dynamics, right?
Absolutely. How do the elements occupy the space? What's the balance between type and white space? Have you thought about creating tension or harmony within the composition? Should it feel precise and controlled, or perhaps more informal and energetic? Does the overall appeal aim to be quiet and genteel, or loud and aggressive? These are all choices that typography enables and communicates.
How do you develop these schemes?
Research and experimentation are crucial. Your focus will shift depending on the artifact. A poster, for instance, will heavily prioritize display type for its visual impact over detailed text type. A book, on the other hand, demands careful consideration of page size, text area, margins, running heads, and page numbers.
Yeah.
Especially if it contains a large amount of continuous text that needs to be comfortable to read.
It's about fitness for purpose.
Precisely. As John Charles Tarr, a prominent typographer, observed, design is always creative because it must always determine its own proportion of values in relation to each other in each part of the design and to its fitness for the purpose of the design. It's about finding that perfect, appropriate fit between form and function.
One of the most challenging and rewarding areas, I think, must be pure type designing effectively without relying on supporting photography or illustration.
It really can be. We're revisiting Beatrice Ward's crystal goblet idea here.
Yeah.
Even invisible text type creates an overall image, a subtle visual texture on the page. The quality of your chosen typefaces makes a huge difference in this context, whether your type is meant to be quietly invisible or boldly conspicuous.
And you need to think about the types of voice.
Definitely. Is it timid or shy, conveying humility? Or proud and confident, perhaps even loud and annoying, demanding attention? We are influenced by the form of type, consciously or subconsciously, almost like listening to a vocal tone.
Eric Gill had something to say about this.
He did. Eric Gill's insight is profound here. Letters are things, not pictures of things. Letters are symbols representing sound, yes, but all typographic elements, letters, words, lines, paragraphs, entire pages, are symbolic in themselves, representing aspects of our world and communication. They carry inherent meaning beyond their literal content.
And this leads us to type only. Shape and form, how type itself, just its shape, evokes meaning.
Yeah. Visualizes typography. All elements take on a form that evokes meaning. It's not just the content that has meaning. The form itself is charged with the potential of meaning, as some theorists put it. A block of dense, justified text, even before you read it, conveys a certain feeling of seriousness or perhaps difficulty just by its shape and density.
So the goal is?
Your goal is to pay meticulous attention to the relationship between communicating the content and how typography's form facilitates that communication, whether helpfully or not. The process involves developing the overall concept first, then focusing on the fine detail. Be creative, be expressive, question conventions, challenge yourself, experiment constantly.
How do you get better at this?
Researching formal aspects, testing type at different sizes, playing with spacing and leading, and studying great historical examples of pure type design will build your confidence. Practice leads to mastery, and pure type works best when it has been confidently and skillfully handled, revealing its inherent power and beauty.
So we've explored pure type, where the letter forms stand heroically on their own. But often, typography works in concert with visuals, leading us to type and image, a dynamic partnership. Combining these elements requires careful consideration. It's not always straightforward, is it? Much depends on the design's ultimate purpose.
That's right. And there are a few key ways type and image can interact. First, and perhaps simplest, images can sit alongside type, acting as separate but complementary elements. Think of a classic magazine spread with a full-page photograph on one side and a block of text clearly on the other. They're distinct, yet visually balanced and related.
Okay, that's next.
Second, images can sit within the body of the type. This is common with text set in columns. Images might occupy a single column width or span several. But you need to be cautious here. Images spreading across multiple columns of text can really break the reading flow, literally making the text jump over the image. So it's often better practice to position images cleanly above or below a continuous story block.
Third option.
Third, type can appear in front of the image. This is probably the trickiest one. You need to carefully consider how the type impacts the image aesthetically, but more critically, how the underlying image affects the type's legibility and readability. If the type is too small or too light, or the image behind it is too busy, the image can completely break up the letter forms and render the type unreadable.
Are there ways around that?
Yes. Solutions include reducing the image's contrast significantly, applying a subtle monotone wash over it, or putting a solid color tint behind the text to create stronger contrast. Alternatively, you can use subtle boxes or panels behind the type that either knock out the image entirely or render the image somewhat translucent in that area, effectively giving the type its own clear visual space to live in.
Can type itself be translucent?
Yes, if the type is very large, especially in display sizes, the type itself can be made translucent, allowing the image to show through, creating a nice layered effect. Related to this is overprinting, where type is printed directly onto an image using inks that allow details beneath to show through, creating a sense of depth. This technique has seen a fashionable resurgence recently, but historically, it sometimes arose out of necessity due to printing limitations.
Okay, fourth.
Fourth, images can appear in front of the type. This is similar, in effect, to translucency or overprinting, perhaps where smaller visual elements like icons or graphic devices might overlay large display type without completely obscuring the text. Fifth, images can appear inside the type. This is where the type outline acts as a kind of picture box or mask, with the image filling the letter forms themselves. While this can be effective if done cleverly, it can also look quite predictable or even a bit cheesy if not executed with great care and originality.
And
finally, type can sit within the image itself. This is either achieved by literally setting it up directly in the photograph, think of words formed by objects in a scene, or by manipulating the image later with software. But a word of caution here. Photo manipulation software can easily lead to crimes against typography if used without consideration and restraint. It's easy to get carried away with filters and effects. Good design requires thoughtful consideration, not just pushing automated buttons.
Beyond just pure communication, we can explore type as image, where type is treated primarily as a form.
Exactly. Type inherently creates images and textures in any design, but we're often desensitized to this due to constant exposure. When we talk about type as image, we typically mean type, usually display sizes, that purposefully goes beyond merely communicating language. It's not just about making obvious pictures out of type, like forming a shape from letters.
What is it then?
It often explores the sculptural character of letter forms themselves. Type can be greatly enlarged, taking on entirely new qualities where the curves, lines, and negative spaces of individual characters are appreciated for their pure aesthetic value. Characters can be used abstractly, ignoring their symbolic sound function to form new visual relationships and dynamic compositions.
Are there historical examples?
Oh yes, Hendrik Nicholas Workman, an early 20th century Dutch artist and printer, was a true pioneer in this expressive display typography, treating type as image. He experimented with type in a very painterly manner, combining metal type, printing blocks, stenciling, stamping, and even found materials in his compositions. He even used this expressive work for powerful political statements, like his De Blauschrift series against the Nazi occupation during the war.
So experimenting with type is encouraged.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic way to understand type better on a fundamental level. It's fun, it's expressive, and it gives incredible insights into how letter forms behave at very large sizes, how they interact visually, and what unique aesthetic qualities they possess when divorced from pure meaning.
Can you break the rules here?
Yes, many formal considerations can be suspended when experimenting like this. Creative parameters can be left completely open to the imagination, as one source puts it. Early pioneers pushed these boundaries constantly, breaking free from the rigid constraints of metal letterpress, printing by hand, collaging, creating montages. Type became expressive, dynamic, creating visual tension, exploring language structure visually. Compositions became abstracted, painterly, showing that type could be as vibrant and evocative as any other art form.
But it still requires skill.
Oh, definitely. Even this experimental approach still requires practice, sensitivity, a keen eye for detail, and a strong sense of taste and appropriateness for the context. The freedom doesn't negate the craft. In fact, it arguably demands an even deeper understanding of it to be successful.
So we have all these elements, type, maybe image, and their arrangement. But how do we make sure our message is clear and easy to follow, especially when there's a lot of different kinds of information on the page? This brings us to creating hierarchy, clarity and order in design.
Yes, its purpose is absolutely crucial. It helps create clarity and order for the reader, providing clear visual signposting between different ordered elements in your design.
What kind of elements are we talking about?
We're talking about differentiating things like main headings, subheadings, stand firsts, those short introductory paragraphs often seen in magazines, the main body text type, captions for images, running heads at the top or bottom of pages, page numbers, folios, pull quotes or display quotes, and perhaps marginal notes or footnotes.
So the designer's job is?
The designer's job is to break complex information down into manageable, identifiable chunks, and then specify the visual relationships and order between them, effectively telling the reader what to look at first, second, third, and what's less important.
How do you achieve that visually?
Mainly through contrast. You need to create enough discernible contrast between distinct elements using size, weight, style, like italic, color, or spacing without them fighting each other for attention or creating visual chaos.
Where do you start?
A good starting point is usually your main text type. Establish that first. For instance, if you choose a very readable sans serif, like Accidents Grotesque Light, at, say, 8 put on 10 point, leading for a clean, modern look.
Then your subheadings.
Your subheadings might not even need a size increase. Perhaps just using the bold weight of the same typeface is enough contrast. Or maybe a line space above them, or a very small size increase, like 2 put, if more separation is needed.
And main headings.
Headings can be much larger, treated as display type, using maybe a different weight or even a contrasting font. But their proportion relative to the text size must be carefully judged to feel harmonious. It's about creating a clear system. The subtle differences in the relationship between type sizes and weights may appear slight at first glance, but they can make a huge difference to the overall design's impact, clarity, and readability, acting as vital visual cues for importance.
Two words that are often confused but are critical to understand here are legibility and readability. Seeing versus understanding. What's the core difference again?
It's simple, but incredibly important. Legibility refers to how clear or well-defined something appears, often at the level of a single character or word. It's largely a quality characteristic of the typeface design itself. Some fonts are inherently more legible than others, especially at small sizes. It's also affected by physical factors like the printing process, the quality of ink, the colors used, and the material it's printed on. Can you easily distinguish the individual letters?
Okay, so legibility is about clarity of form and readability.
Readability, on the other hand, refers to how easily and comfortably the overall typography can be read and understood over a period of time. It's affected by legibility factors, yes, but also by larger design choices, like the type size chosen, the line length, the leading line spacing, the word spacing, and the alignment. Can you comfortably process the information without strain or difficulty?
Because the main job is.
The main job of type is, after all, to be read. Developing this skill means familiarizing yourself with good quality typefaces known for their readability, practicing setting text in different contexts, and learning to identify problems by adjusting size, spacing, and leading until it feels right. As Oliver Simon, another key figure, said, to achieve harmony and legibility is the main object of typography. You need both.
That harmony is often discussed using the term typographic color, which is a bit of a strange term for something that isn't usually about literal color, is it? What does it actually mean?
That's a great question. It's a very abstract but crucial concept for text setting. Typographic color refers to the overall quality or texture of a block of text, often aiming for a consistent evenness or uniform grayness across the page. It's achieved by meticulous attention to all those microtypographic details and their impact on the overall visual appearance.
So it's about making the entire block of text look consistent and balanced, like a well-woven piece of fabric. No distracting light or dark patches.
Precisely. That's a perfect analogy. The choice of typeface is a primary factor here.
Yeah.
Good quality, well-drawn types, whether serif or sans serif, contribute significantly to this evenness. It's like selecting a high-quality thread to weave into a material. The thread's consistency and quality affect the final fabric's look and feel, and then spacing dramatically changes this color or texture.
So that's letter spacing, word spacing, and line spacing, or leading, right, all contributing.
Yes, absolutely. Letter spacing should rarely be altered arbitrarily from the font's default in body text. Too close, and letters clump together, creating dark patches. Too much, and words start to break apart visually. Bolder types sometimes benefit from slight negative tracking, narrowing, to look optically balanced. Word spacing ideally should approximate the width of a lowercase I in that font. Too wide, and you get those distracting holes or rivers running through the text. Too little, and words run together, making it hard to distinguish them.
And leading.
And line spacing, leading.
Yeah.
Too narrow makes the text look thick, heavy, and uninvitable, like a dense, impenetrable block. Too wide separates the lines too much, making it harder for the eye to track smoothly from the end of one line to the beginning of the next. All these micro-adjustments are crucial for achieving that desired even texture and ensuring comfortable, sustained reading.
And finally, let's talk about type and color, the actual visual palette. This is especially important for text type, as the effects are noticed readily, often subconsciously impacting how we feel about the content and how easy it is to read.
Yeah. The vast majority of continuous text is black type on a white or off-white background for maximum contrast. Off-white or cream is often preferred in books because it reduces glare and can feel warmer and more comfortable for long reading sessions. Contrast between the type and its background is absolutely key for legibility.
What are the problems if the contrast is wrong?
Well, too high a contrast, like pure black on brilliant white under harsh light, can sometimes cause a dazzling or flickering effect, leading to eye strain. But too low contrast, say light gray type on a mid-gray background, and the type simply disappears into the background, becoming unreadable.
Are there specific color combinations to avoid for text?
Definitely. Yellow type on a white background is often practically invisible. The yellow tends to spread visually, and it's hard to discern the edges of the letters. And certain color combinations, like blue text on a green background, light blue on orange, or the classic red on green, can be very difficult to read due to poor value contrast, and are also particularly problematic for people with common forms of color blindness.
So less is more with color.
Often, yes. Joseph Miller Brockman wisely advised, the sparing but methodical and logical use of color has a more telling effect than a combination of many different colors. Using limited palettes, maybe just black plus one or two carefully chosen colors, can force more creative thinking about how to use color strategically, can reduce printing costs significantly, and often leads to more impactful and focused designs. Practice and testing are key to finding what works.
Okay, so to bring all these concepts of hierarchy, legibility, and color together, we have an idea for design task 3, creating a simple poster. Your task is to conceptualize an A2 poster, which is a fairly large size, say 420 by 594 millimeters, or roughly 16.5 by 23.4 inches.
And the content, your own 100-word definition of typography, perhaps building on what we discussed earlier, or maybe the one you wrote for task 4 if you do that. Give it a clear title, something like typography is, or my definition of typography.
Yeah, first step.
First, think about your grid system for that A2 paper. You can sketch this out manually. No need for a computer here initially. Decide whether it'll be a simple column structure or maybe a modular grid. Decide on your column width, gutter widths, and margins.
Then the type.
Then, using a simple, readable sans serif font, typeset your 100-word copy on the computer. Maybe set it at around 10-put type with 12-put leading, ranged left, to fit within your chosen column width. Set your title in the same font family, perhaps a bolder weight, and make it significantly larger, ranging anywhere from 48-bit up to maybe 100-bit, depending on the visual impact you want to achieve.
And then print it out.
Yeah, print these elements out, your body text block and your large title photocopy, enlarge them if needed to get different scale options, then physically cut them out. Now comes the fun part. Using your hand-drawn grid as a guide, physically arrange your text and title elements onto your A2 sheet into as many different compositions as you can within, say, 1 hour. Play around. Photograph your favorites as you go.
And a final step.
Then, choose your best composition and try to recreate it relatively accurately on the computer, noting all the precise measurements and placements you used. The key rule throughout this is that your main 100-word text type must remain clear, readable, and legible, serving its primary function. Your display typography, the title, however, can be anything from ordered and sophisticated to loud and aggressive. It's your opportunity to be expressive with scale and placement.
Any tips for the arrangement part?
Plan your exploration of scale, proportion, tension, balance, and symmetry, or asymmetry. Push your ideas. Don't be afraid of using huge type for the title or creating strong contrasts. Explore the entire page area type can crop off the edge, exit the page dramatically, rotate, repeat. And remember, this task is about working at 100% scale. Constantly zooming in and out on a computer screen can give you a false impression of the final size and impact. This task truly brings together many of the concepts we've discussed so far, from micro details like leading to macro composition and hierarchy.
As you continue to practice these tasks and just observe type more closely, you'll find yourself noticing even the tiniest details in typographic matter that were once completely invisible. This is where we get into detailing typography, mastering the fine points.
It's true. Learning typography is a lifelong process. Much like learning a musical instrument, it truly improves with time and regular, deliberate practice. You develop a finer sensitivity.
And that deliberate practice helps you refine your work and develop a truly sensitive eye for detail. We'll start with type specifics, acknowledging that type actually has 2 sizes we need to think about: a given size and an appearing size.
Right. When you select, say, 10-bit type on a computer, you're specifying the size of the body, the invisible box that accommodates all characters in the font, including the tallest descenders, the lowest descenders, and even punctuation. The appearing size is how large the actual letter forms look optically within that body.
So this means that 10-pit Garamond might appear visually smaller than 10-pit Helvetica, even though they're both technically set at 10-pit.
Exactly. Because Helvetica is designed to fill more of that body space, it has a larger X height relative to its body size, making it appear larger. This means when you're mixing different typefaces in the same piece of text, you often need to adjust their point sizes visually, perhaps by matching their X heights, to make them appear harmonious and optically the same size, even if their specified point sizes are slightly different.
That's a subtle but important point.
It is. And some typeface families even have specific optical variations drawn by the type designer for different size ranges. For instance, caption sizes might be drawn wider and heavier for maximum clarity at very small scale, while display sizes might have lighter strokes or reduced serifs to look balanced and elegant when greatly enlarged. It's always best practice to use the appropriate drawn size variant if it's available for optimal results at that specific scale.
Next up, leading, also known as line spacing or interlinear spacing. This term comes from the days of metal type, you said, where literal strips of lead were inserted between lines of metal type to adjust their vertical spacing for visual evenness.
That's the origin, yeah. Today, we specify leading digitally in points on the computer. But the principle is exactly the same, adjusting the vertical space between lines for clarity and visual comfort.
What's a typical default?
The default in many design software packages is usually around 120% of the type size. So 10-pit type might auto-set to 12-teeth leading, which you'll often see written as 1012-pete. This means 10-pit type sitting on a 12-pete deep body, effectively giving you 10-pit type plus 2 pete of space below it, or measuring 12-pete from baseline to baseline.
But you advise against defaults.
Crucially, don't rely on software defaults. Always specify your own leading based on the typeface and the context, and be precise. For example, 120% of 12-pete would be 14.4-pete leading. That's an irrational figure you'd probably want to round to something sensible like 14.5 pt or maybe even 15-pete for easier calculations and consistency.
Does the amount needed vary?
Yes. Different typefaces need different leading amounts for optimal comfort and evenness due to their unique designs, like X height and ascender-descender length. Avoid overspacing or underspacing your lines, as this significantly impacts readability and the overall typographic color or texture of the text block.
And what happens at larger sizes?
As type increases in size for display use, the relative ratio of leading to type size generally needs to be reduced. At very large display sizes, leading values may even need to be set smaller than the type size itself, negative leading, to maintain a cohesive visual block of text and prevent the lines from looking too disconnected and spread out.
Finally, for this section on detailing line length or measure, this defines your type area or column width and is incredibly important for readability, as we touched on.
Yes, lines should be neither too long nor too short. It's a delicate balance that profoundly affects the reading experience.
What's the ideal range again?
A useful guide for comfortable continuous reading in English is somewhere in the range of 50 to 70 characters wide, which translates to approximately 8 to 12 words per line, depending on the language and typeface.
And this affects pacing.
It's critical for pacing the reading experience. Shorter lines, like those common in newspapers and magazines, encourage quicker reading and scanning, as the eye has less distance to travel back and forth. Longer lines, like those often found in novels and books, tend to slow down the reading pace, allowing for deeper, more immersive digestion of the content. As Emil Reuter eloquently put it, no art demands for its perfection more tenderness than the art of typography. It's about achieving that gentle, almost invisible support for the reader.
Now we're getting into the truly granular stuff, the art of precision, fine-tuning type. This is where those tiny adjustments make a huge difference, often noticed only subconsciously by the reader, but profoundly impacting the overall quality and professionalism of the piece. Let's start with kerning adjusting individual letter pairs.
Right. Historically, as we mentioned, a kern was literally a physical part of a metal-type character that overhung its body to tuck into the space of its neighbor. Today, in digital type, it refers to the meticulous individual adjustment of space between specific letter pairs to compensate for awkward visual spacing that occurs due to their shapes. Think of the large gap that can appear between an uppercase A and a V, or a T and lowercase a.
Does software handle this automatically?
Modern software and well-made fonts handle many common kerning pairs, automatically based on tables built by the type designer. However, you'll almost always still need to make manual adjustments, especially as type size increases in display settings, like headlines, where these subtle spacing imperfections become much more glaring and noticeable.
What are some common kerning challenges or rules of thumb?
Well, general rules include letters with rounded or angular sides, like O, C, A, V, often need slightly less space next to straight letters. Letters with strong vertical emphasis, like H, I, and L, might need a bit more space around them. The lowercase f often creates problems with letters that follow it, which is one reason ligatures like phi and shield exist. Numerals, especially the number 1, and various punctuation marks also frequently need careful kerning adjustments.
And for all caps.
Setting text in all uppercase generally needs more overall space between the letters, tracking, which we'll get to, and potentially more kerning attention, because the uniform height makes the spaces between them look less even than in Bics' case. As Vincent Steer wisely wrote, 90% of the proofs which disappoint the typographer owe their failure to please to an utter disregard of spacing. It's all about managing that white space effectively. Okay, so beyond adjusting individual letter pairs with kerning, we have tracking, which adjusts the overall spacing of a selected block of text uniformly. You can increase or decrease it slightly.
Why would you adjust tracking?
Several reasons. You might adjust it slightly to compensate for a typeface's inherent spacing, if it feels generally too tight or too loose. You might add a tiny bit of positive tracking to improve readability in some contexts, or apply a very small amount of negative tracking, tightening, to save space and fit copy into a specific area, though this should be done with extreme caution in body text.
When is tracking most important or noticeable?
Uppercase text in particular almost always requires additional positive overall tracking, opening up the spacing, to allow the letters to breathe properly. Because the letters are all the same height and often have larger internal counterspaces, they need more visual room around them than lowercase letters do.
But be careful with text.
Absolutely. For continuous text, use tracking very sparingly. Too much positive tracking, and the words start to break apart and look disjointed, hindering readability. Too much negative tracking, and the letters and words bunch up uncomfortably, creating a dense, spotty, or patchy appearance that fatigues the eye. Generally, only very small amounts, typically plus Meissner 3 units, where units are often 11/1000th of an em, are considered acceptable for tweaking continuous text settings.
So to recap spacing quickly, there are 3 crucial forms we've discussed. Letter spacing, controlled by kerning and tracking, word spacing, and line spacing, which is leading.
Exactly. For letter spacing, the key takeaway is, don't alter it arbitrarily from the font's design, without a very good reason, especially in lowercase text. Avoid crashing letters together or creating distracting white patches between them. Too much positive tracking increases word separation, making lines harder to read. Bolder or larger types might sometimes need slight negative tracking to look optically balanced. Remember Jan Chitold's famous and perhaps slightly extreme declaration. It should be a rule that lowercase is never and under no circumstances to be letter spaced.
Okay, point taken. And word spacing.
Word spacing is primarily determined by the font design itself, often built into the spacebar character. Ideally, it should approximate the width of a lowercase I in that specific font for good rhythm. It may need subtle reduction in display settings to keep words visually grouped. Too wide, and you get those unsightly holes or rivers in justified text. Too little, and words run together, making it hard to distinguish word boundaries.
Do these need adjustment at large sizes?
Yes. Both letter and word spacing often require subtle adjustment for optical correctness as type size increases. Usually a slight reduction is needed to maintain a cohesive visual unit. Bolder types may also benefit from slightly narrower word spacing. Historically, printers used precise physical spaces measured in fractions of an em, like the end space, thick space, middle space, thin space, even a tiny hair space to achieve this granular control.
Next, H&Js, which stands for hyphenation and justification settings. These are the parameters you set in your software to control automatic adjustments over a whole body of text.
Right. For hyphenation, you can specify whether text should hyphenate at all. Setting text without hyphens, ranged left, can give the purest, most aesthetically pleasing paragraph edges with unbroken words, but it requires careful line-ending management. If you do use hyphenation, a common rule is to allow a maximum of 2 hyphens on consecutive lines to avoid a distracting visual ladder effect down the right edge.
And justification.
Justification settings allow you to define minimum, optimum, and maximum values for how much the software is allowed to adjust letter spacing and word spacing to make the lines fill the column width exactly. The key is to avoid allowing extreme adjustments, as even small changes here have a big impact on the overall typographic color and readability. You want just enough flexibility, but not so much that it creates huge gaps or squashed words.
What about adjusting the letter widths themselves?
Adjusting the actual width of the letter forms, sometimes called glyph scaling or horizontal scaling, is generally frowned upon by typographers because it distorts the integrity of the typeface design. However, tiny adjustments, maybe only 1–3%, are sometimes deemed permissible, particularly in narrow columns for newspapers or long texts, purely to help fit copy or avoid awkward line breaks. But many purist designers still refuse to do this at all, preferring to edit the text or change the layout.
We also need to be aware of special characters that go beyond the standard letters and numbers on our keyboard layout, things like accents for different languages, specific punctuation marks, and a whole universe of symbols.
Absolutely. Standard font sets for Western Latin-based languages typically contain around 256 characters, each identified by a Unicode number. Accessing these often requires using specific key combinations, like the Alt key on Windows or Option P on Mac, or more easily using the glyph palettes available in professional design software, which show you every single character available in the font.
And then there are even more extensive fonts, Expert and OpenType Pro fonts.
Yes. Historically, Expert sets were separate fonts you had to buy that contained additional characters needed for complex or sophisticated typesetting. These included things like a full range of ligatures, not just Feifel, but maybe FEFLL and others. Old-style figures, numerals like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 that have elonders and descenders, blending better with lowercase text. True small caps, not just shrunken capitals. Meticulously designed fractions, mathematical symbols, and sometimes decorative ornaments or swash characters.
But they were hard to use.
The challenge with these separate expert sets was that implementing them in large documents could be incredibly difficult and time-consuming, often involving lengthy find-replace operations to swap standard characters for their expert versions.
How are OpenType Pro fonts different?
OpenType Pro fonts make this much easier. They are essentially smart fonts. The type designer programs all these extra features and alternate characters directly into the single font file as attributes. These attributes can then be simply switched on or off with checkboxes or menus directly within your layout program, like InDesign or Quark Express. This saves enormous amounts of time compared to the old search and replace methods.
What can they contain?
OpenType fonts, based on the earlier TrueType format, can contain up to 65,536 characters, supporting virtually any Unicode language script. They are also cross-platform compatible between Mac and Windows. They allow for features like automatic ligature substitution, different numeral styles, lining, old style, tabular proportional, true small caps, contextual alternates, stylistic sets, and much more, all within one font file.
But you need restrict.
Always. Not all jobs need huge sets of ligatures or fancy alternates, but having access to these features through OpenType Pro fonts is invaluable for achieving high-quality, nuanced typography when the occasion demands it.
Okay, so to solidify your understanding of these fine-tuning points, here's Design Task 4, Spaced Out. This one sounds quite specific.
It is, but it's really valuable for getting a feel for micro-adjustments.
Okay.
Take your 100-word definition of typography again, maybe the one from Task 3. Create a text box, say 85 millimeter wide, a typical single column width for a book or a bit magazine, in your layout program. Place your text in it and set it using a classic serif font like Garamond, maybe a 10-point size with 10 point leading. So set solid 10 on 10, ranged left.
Okay, got the baseline.
Now, duplicate this box side by side, leaving a small gap, say 10 millimeters between them. In the second box, change the leading to 12 point, 10, 12. In the third, try 14 put, 10, 14. In the fourth, maybe 16 put, 10, 16. Now, compare these 4 blocks closely, print them out if you can. Note which leading setting appears to read most evenly and comfortably for that specific typeface at that size and line length.
Then experiment further.
Yes. Repeat this procedure, perhaps starting again with the 10-12 setting as your base. This time, make subtle changes to the word spacing values within the justification settings. Even though it's ranged left, these settings can still affect the default spacing. Try making it slightly tighter, then slightly looser. Again, compare and evaluate. Then do the same thing again, but this time, experiment with tiny adjustments to letter spacing, tracking, maybe +3 units, -3 unit.
And the goal is evaluation.
Yes, evaluate which combination of values gives, in your judgment, the better, more comfortable reading experience. Try this exercise with different fonts too, maybe a sans serif or another serif. Well, this might not seem like the most exciting task in the world.
Maybe not.
It will give you incredible insight and confidence in handling text types sensitively with regular practice. You start to feel the differences. Remember our tip. Take your time and look at the small changes. It is these that will have a big impact on any large body of text. This task truly brings together the theory and practice of microtypography, making those subtle shifts visible and allowing you to judge their impact.
We've delved deep into the mechanics and fine-tuning of typography. Now let's talk about the unspoken rules, the finesse, the things that mark out truly considered work, what we're calling practicing typographic etiquette. It starts right at the beginning with choosing fonts.
Yes, and the key here is choosing for the intended purpose. Always prioritizing that over your personal preference or just picking something trendy. You need to decide clearly. Is this a text typeface or a display typeface? They need to function very differently.
What questions should you ask for text types?
You need to ask, is it genuinely readable and legible at the small sizes required for body text? Does it have the right tone? Will it appear too formal or maybe too fussy for the content, say a lively magazine article? For continuous text, especially if you're learning, it's often wise to start with timeless classics known for their readability, faces like Bembo, Caslon, Garamond, Bell, Earhart, Baskerville, Planton, maybe Bodoni or Scotch Roman.
And get them from good sources.
Yep, definitely. Go for quality versions from reputable type foundries, rather than relying on free internet downloads, which might have incomplete character sets, poor kerning tables, or just be poorly drawn, especially for extended, comfortable reading.
When it comes to mixing fonts, what's the main rule of etiquette?
The rule of thumb is very clear and almost universally agreed upon. Less is more. Seriously, first ask yourself why you need to mix fonts at all. Is it truly necessary for clarity or hierarchy?
What's the ideal scenario?
If you can achieve all the contrast and hierarchy you need by sticking to a single well-designed font family and simply using its different variants like Roman or regular, italic, bold, maybe light or black weights, that nearly always results in the most harmonious and professional-looking design.
But if you do need a second font,
If a second font is genuinely necessary, it must create strong visual contrast with the first one. Avoid the common mistake of mixing two fairly similar serif fonts or two fairly similar sans serifs. They often lack sufficient distinction, look visually cluttered, and can make the design look like an accident rather than an intentional choice.
so the classic pairing is?
The classic safe pairing is one serif font and one sans serif font. Only in the most complex typographic settings, like a heavily structured textbook with many levels of information, should you even consider using more than two distinct font families. There are some super font families designed with serif sans and sometimes slab serif members intended to work harmoniously together, which can be useful.
Are there exceptions?
Display typography is perhaps the rare exception where a carefully orchestrated cacophony or riot of fonts can sometimes work effectively, perhaps for a poster or an expressive piece, but only with very careful thought, a strong concept, and usually a master's eye to pull it off successfully. For most work, simplicity rules.
Communicating with fonts goes beyond mere legibility, doesn't it? Fonts add voice, character, and tone to your work, even if you're aiming for neutrality. The font you choose is a powerful, nonverbal signal.
It really is. Take Helvetica, for example. Depending on the context and the viewer's own associations, it can be perceived as cool and modern, or maybe dull and boring, or precise and scientific, or perhaps affected and overly stylized. Its meaning isn't fixed. It's created in context.
So you need a reason.
Always have a clear, rational reason for choosing a particular font. What specific qualities or feelings should it communicate to the audience about the message or the brand? And please, avoid cliches. Don't overstate the point with obvious literal choices. Like we said, you wouldn't use Comic Sans MS for a solicitor's official letterhead, nor would you use a highly ornate, fussy script font like ITC Galliard for a children's fun day invitation. Fonts have inherent semiotic properties. They can feel warm, strong, delicate, technical, historical, futuristic, stoic. Think beyond your personal taste and current trends. Your font choice doesn't just reflect on the design. It reflects on you as a designer and, importantly, on your client's credibility and brand perception.
Sizing fonts also requires a systematic approach and a clear rationale for scale, rather than just picking random sizes.
Yes, build a system. Start with your main text type, establish its size and leading for optimal readability, and then work out all of their sizes, subheads, headings, captions, etc., in relation to it, building a clear and consistent visual hierarchy.
How much bigger should subheadings be?
Often, for subheadings, no size change is needed at all. Just using a contrast in weight, like bold, or style, like italic, within the same font family provides enough distinction. If a size increase is necessary, often a subtle 2-pip increase is usually enough to make it stand out appropriately. You rarely need to increase both size and weight simultaneously. Pick one for clarity.
What if you mix types on the same line?
If you're mixing different typefaces on the same line, perhaps for emphasis or a quote, try to adjust their point sizes so their X heights appear visually equal for better harmony. And remember, for display sizes, as the font size increases significantly, you need to pay close attention to spacing. Display sizes may need manually reduced letter spacing, kerning tracking, and word spacing to look optically correct and impactful.
Here's a big piece of etiquette that empowers the designer: default typography. The advice is don't rely on software defaults for anything.
Absolutely. That includes the default paper size, margins, grids, columns, the default font, often something bland like Calibri or Times New Roman, the default type size, leading, line length, or even color palettes. As a designer, you should be making conscious, informed decisions about all these elements and testing them rigorously. Take full control of your design environment.
Even H&J settings.
While the default hyphenation justification settings might provide a useful starting point, you need to learn how to adjust them precisely as you refine your work to achieve the best results for your specific text and layout. And crucially, avoid using forced or faux styles from your software's style panel, like clicking a B button to make a font bold if a true bold weight doesn't exist in that family, or using the underline button,
Why not?
because these often just electronically thicken or slant the regular font, distorting its design. Always find and use the correct, specifically designed font family variant, bold, italic, etc. First for genuine typographic quality and integrity.
For alignment, what's the preferred approach for text?
Left align, or range left, flush left, is generally preferred for continuous body text in many contexts, especially for shorter texts or on screen. This is because it provides consistent word spacing, making the texture more even, and a clear, predictable left edge for the reader's eye to return to after each line. If you need to hyphenate line endings to avoid excessively ragged right edges, remember the guideline. Max 2 consecutive hyphens.
What about justified text?
Justified text creates even left and right edges, giving a very formal block-like appearance common in books and newspapers. However, it requires very careful management of word and letter spacing through H&J settings to avoid those distracting holes and rivers of white space, especially in narrow columns.
And right alignment.
Right alignment, or ranged right, flush right, can be useful for captions, side notes, or small blocks of secondary text, but it's generally difficult for reading longer passages because the ragged left edge provides no fixed point for the reader's eye to return to easily.
Centered alignment.
Centered alignment should be used with great care and usually only for short amounts of text, like headlines, invitations, or poetry. It lacks fixed vertical edges on either side, which makes tracking lines tiring for longer texts.
Detailing paragraphs requires absolute consistency and attention to subtle rules.
Yes. Firstly, don't mix alignments within the same stream of paragraphs. Stick to one. Line length, as we've said, should be shorter for quicker readings, newspapers, longer for lengthy texts, books. Decide consistently on hyphenation.
What about line endings?
For left-aligned text, watch out for very short lines caused by small hanging words or orphans at the end of paragraphs. Try to adjust tracking slightly or edit the text to move them down to the next line for a smoother edge. For paragraph breaks, use either a clear line space, often equal to the leading, or a first-line indent, but don't mix both methods within the same body of text. Choose one and be consistent.
How big should an indent be?
An indent should ideally be 1 width, the current type size, for clarity. Remember, the very first paragraph in a section or chapter should generally not be indented unless it's accompanied by a decorative drop cap, which serves the same purpose.
Tell us about drop caps.
Drop caps, those large initial letters used at the start of a chapter or section, can be very elegant, but use them thoughtfully. They ideally occupy maybe 2 or 3 lines deep of the main text. Avoid using too many, and always check for potentially embarrassing word combinations if you have consecutive drop caps on a spread.
And columns need alignment.
If you have multiple columns of text on a page, always use a baseline grid to ensure the baselines of text cross-aligned horizontally, creating that crucial visual rhythm. And finally, strive to avoid those typographic undesirables. Widows, a short word or line ending a paragraph left alone at the top of the next page column, and orphans, a single word or very short line left alone at the bottom of a paragraph. Adjust tracking, line breaks, or even edit the text slightly to fix them.
Regarding tracking and scaling again, the etiquette is quite strict.
It is. Tracking should be used sparingly in text settings, perhaps only for very subtle adjustments to improve readability or save space if absolutely necessary. It's often more necessary and acceptable for larger display sizes or heavy types to balance internal spaces. It's rarely appropriate for lowercase text, which is designed for close fitting.
And scaling.
As a rule, do not horizontally scale type, stretching or squashing it. It distorts the carefully crafted features of the typeface and looks unprofessional. Find a typeface that naturally has the width characteristics you need, condensed, extended. The only potential exception is making very, very small adjustments, maybe plus minus 1-3%, to text type purely for fitting copy or improving justification in tricky situations. But even this is refused by some designers who prioritize the integrity of the font above all else.
Okay, now for some rapid-fire setting conventions, the real nitty-gritty of typographic etiquette that often separates professional work from amateur.
Let's go. Abbreviations. Modern usage often omits the full point, like Prof. M. Smith. If you do use full points, use a single word space after each, Prof. M. Smith. Be consistent.
Acronyms can be initial caps or all caps, often set in true small caps within body text for better integration. Generally, no full points between letters, so RIBA, not RIBA.
Ampersand. It's an abbreviation for and. originally a ligature of the Latin eight. Best practice is to spell out "and" in continuous text. Use the ampersand mainly for display or in established company names and partnerships, like Smith& Brown.
Apostrophe, used for possessives or contractions. Abbreviations like don't. Be careful with its correct usage. It's versus its. And crucially, use the proper curly typographer's apostrophe, not the straight typewriter version.
Brackets, parentheses. Generally, no extra word space separating the content inside the brackets or the brackets themselves. Fine-tune spacing with kerning if needed, especially if the character next to the bracket is tall or slanted.
Capitals, initial letters. Used for proper names, beginnings of sentences. Not always necessary or desirable for heading titles. Sentence case or title case conventions vary.
Dashes, N and M. These are not hyphens. The N dash is typically used for ranges, like 6-8 p meters or pages 10-15, and often has a thin space or word space on either side when connecting phrases. The longer M dash indicates a larger pause or interruption in thought, often with no space on either side. They might need a slight baseline shift when used with small caps or non-lining figures.
Dates. Style varies. British style is often day, month, year, 16 January 2011. U.S. style is often month, day, year, January 16th, 2011. Be consistent based on your audience or style guide.
Ellipses indicates omissions in quoted text. Use the proper single ellipsis character if available, or 3 space periods. No space before it if part of a word is omitted, but use a space before and after if whole words are missing.
Fractions. Use properly designed fraction glyphs if your font has them, like half and 44. If not, create them using superior and inferior numerals and the fraction slash, not the regular solidus.
Hyphens, used only to join compound words, like well-being, or to break words at the end of lines. Not interchangeable with N or M dashes.
Ligatures, phi, FL, FL, FL. These are specially drawn glyphs combining awkward letter combinations for smoother reading. Primarily intended for text sizes, they can look odd in large display. Good OpenType Pro fonts have extensive ligature sets you can enable. Don't overuse them if they look distracting.
Measurements and math symbols. Set them correctly using the proper symbols like 10, 8, 10 centimeter equals 1 meter. Use the multiplication sign 8, not a lowercase x. Use slight kerning around symbols for clarity.
Numerals. Use lining figures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, all the same height, for tabular data where alignment is key, or in all caps settings. Use non-lining or old-style figures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, with ascenders and descenders for better integration within upper and lowercase text. Some fonts also offer small caps numerals.
Point full, decimal mid, the full point, period full stop, should have a single word space after it. Decimal points or midpoints are used for monetary values or sometimes in specific notations. Ensure they align correctly with setting tabular figures. Midpoints can look awkward with non-lining figures.
Prime, another. These are specific symbols for feet and inches. For example, 5 foot 10. They are not the same as apostrophes or quotation marks. Italic versions can sometimes soften their appearance.
Quotes. Use proper curly quotes. Conventions vary by language. British English typically uses single quotes first, with double quotes inside. American English usually uses double quotes first, with single quotes inside. Punctuation placement relative to the closing quote also varies, usually inside in US, often outside in UK unless part of the quote. French, German, Spanish use different styles, like pontpatarn. For clean alignment, typographers often hang the opening quote slightly outside the main text area margin.
Register and trademark. These symbols should ideally appear at the text size, not automatically superscripted unless the design specifically calls for it. Observe spacing and kerning around them carefully.
Small caps. True small caps, designed specifically, not just shrunken capitals, are elegant for acronyms within text, some company names, abbreviations like AD or BC, postcodes, or sometimes character names and place scripts. They integrate better with lowercase text than full caps.
Underlining. Avoid it for emphasis in text. It disturbs descenders, looks dated, and traditionally indicates text that should be italicized in manuscript preparation. Use italic or bold for emphasis instead. Its only acceptable modern use is generally for live hyperlinks on the web. We've talked a lot about the craft, the art, and the etiquette of typography. Now, let's wrap up by looking at typography and technology today. Tools of the trade. Typography has always been intimately linked to technology, hasn't it? From early metal type to today's sophisticated digital tools.
Absolutely. And knowing that technology, understanding the tools is crucial for skilled typographic design today. It empowers creativity rather than hindering it. Most design jobs now require proficiency in specific software packages. Great ideas are only great if they can be produced effectively.
So it's about Using the correct tools for the job, what are the main categories?
Well, for detailed typographic work involving layout, page layout, and document construction software, like Adobe InDesign or Quark Express, are really the best tools. They allow incredibly precise specification of type, handle multiple pages seamlessly, and manage linked matter like fonts, photos, and illustrations efficiently using object-oriented descriptions. They're built for typography.
What about Photoshop? People use type in Photoshop all the time.
They do, but photo manipulation software, like Photoshop, is primarily designed for image making. In editing, it works with pixels. While it can be useful for creating very large, perhaps heavily textured or image-like display type, it generally causes clarity issues for small print type due to anti-aliasing blur, that slight fuzziness around the edges needed to blend pixels, which makes sharp text hard to achieve. Resolution and color reproduction for print can also be problematic, and type layers often aren't easily editable once effects are applied.
An illustration software like Illustrator.
Illustration software, like Adobe Illustrator, is ideal for creating unique pieces like logo types, icons, or strong, clean display type elements. It uses vector outlines, which are mathematical descriptions, meaning they can be scaled infinitely without losing quality and are resolution independent. Small amounts of type, especially display type, can be effectively added here.
Can you combine them?
Yes, the key is integration. You can combine and link files from different software. For example, placing a vector logo from Illustrator or an edited photo from Photoshop into your InDesign layout. But doing this seamlessly and managing the workflow requires learning and practice. And generally, please avoid using basic word processing software for designing typographic documents meant for professional output. They just don't offer the precision, control, or print readiness needed.
It's amazing how far things have come since the desktop revolution.
Oh, completely. The mid-1980s with the Apple Macintosh in '84, the Apple LaserWriter printer in '85, which crucially included Adobe PostScript, the language for describing pages, and Aldus PageMaker software, also in '85. That combination triggered a massive paradigm shift, giving designers unprecedented freedom and control right on their desktops. But remember Eric Gill's quote, "A sculptor does not see his hammer and chisel when he is carving, but only the stone in front of him." The software and hardware are just tools, enabling you to craft the design.
When choosing software for single and multi-page designs, what's the guideline?
For single-page designs requiring precision, like posters or brochures with columns, grids, and careful alignment, a dedicated design layout program, like InDesign, is usually best. For more image-like display type on that poster, you might create that element in photo or illustration software first. But here's the crucial point again. Avoid adding small, detailed print type directly within photo image-based software if you want sharp results. Always bring the final image into your layout application and add the text there for optimal clarity and control.
And for multi-page work like books or magazines?
For multi-page work, a design layout application is really the main, almost only, viable option for achieving precise, detailed typographic treatment, consistent styling, and complex image placement across many pages efficiently.
To boost efficiency and consistency across these large documents, designers rely heavily on master pages and guides.
Absolutely. Master pages act as virtual templates that you can apply to various pages or sections within your document. They allow you to specify attributes like margins, column guides, background colors, repeating elements for entire groups of pages at once.
What kind of elements go on master pages?
Common elements include placeholder text frames, picture boxes, repeating graphic elements like rules or logos, running heads like chapter titles, folios, page numbers, and automatic page numbering markers. The huge benefit is global changes. Change something on a master page, like moving the page number, and it instantly updates on every single page that uses that master.
Can they handle complex layouts?
Yes. Modern software even allows you to have multi-page sizes within a single document, specified as differing master pages, offering incredible flexibility for things like foldouts or special sections. And setting up grids is often automated too. You can just state your desired measurements and number of columns rows, and the software creates the guides, rather than you having to draw each line individually. But remember the principle. The grid aids design. It doesn't force it. It's a guiding framework, not a prison.
For ultimate consistency and efficiency at scale, especially with typography, we rely on type and style sheets.
These are absolutely essential for professional work, especially on larger projects. Once you've tested your fonts and decided on the specific typographic treatment for your various information structures, like main headings, H1, subheadings, H2, body text, captions, lists, you create name styles for each element.
What can styles control?
Styles can be defined at the character level, just affecting selected text, or more commonly at the paragraph level, affecting the whole paragraph. You assign all the attributes you want to that style. The specific font, size, leading, color, H&J settings, alignment, indents, space before after, rules above below, bullet points, numbering, and much more.
And the benefit?
The benefits are enormous. Firstly, consistency. You apply the style, and the formatting is instantly correct. Secondly, efficiency. You can change the attributes of a style globally, for instance. Decide to change the body text font for an entire 100-page book, and every paragraph tagged with that style updates instantly across the whole document. It improves accuracy dramatically and saves literally hours or even days on large projects.
When preparing type-in original and output files for sending to a printer, what happens to the fonts?
Sometimes, fonts may need to be converted to outlines or paths before sending the final file to a commercial printer or production house. This process essentially turns the editable font characters into fixed graphic shapes, making them non-editable as text, but ensuring they display in print exactly as intended, even if the recipient doesn't have the specific font installed. Should you always do this? Not always, but it's often requested by printers as a safety measure. Crucially, always keep an editable copy of your original file with live fonts before you outline them. Outlining might be particularly necessary for complicated foreign language fonts or very unusual or special fonts that might cause problems with the printer's RIP, raster image processor, software. Always check with your printer about their preferred file format and font handling. And always provide high-quality hard copy proofs along with your final digital artwork for professional printing, so they have a reference of exactly what you expect.
For universal delivery and viewing, we often use portable document files, PDFs.
Yes. PDFs have become the industry standard for sharing work across different platforms and operating systems, for viewing, and importantly, for high-quality print output. They preserve the layout, fonts, images, and graphics of the source document.
How are they created?
They are usually exported or distilled from the original software application, like InDesign. Some software allows you to save as an editable PDF, but typically export settings are used to create print-ready PDFs.
Do fonts need outlining for PDFs?
Generally, no. One of the key advantages of the PDF format is that font information can be embedded directly within the PDF file itself. This means the recipient doesn't need to have the specific font installed on their system to view or print the document correctly, and the text usually remains selectable and searchable, unlike outlined text.
What checks are needed for print PDFs?
For final print output, you need to ensure your PDF export settings are correct. This includes checking things like image resolution, DPI, ensuring the correct color space is used, for example, CMYK for offset printing, including sufficient bleed, extending artwork beyond the trim edge, and adding crop marks, trim marks, so the printer knows exactly where to cut the page. There are often industry standards or specific printer requirements to follow, like the Pass4 press standards used in the UK, which provide useful guidelines. Wolfgang Weingart perfectly summarized this whole interplay. For me, typography is a triangular relationship between design idea, typographic elements, and printing technique. It's about bringing all three together successfully.
Finally, proofing the last mile, and arguably one of the most critical stages before committing to a large print run. What you see on your screen or even on your desktop printer isn't necessarily accurate for high-quality commercial printing, is it?
That's absolutely right. The subtle nuances of ink on paper, especially with offset lithography, can be quite different. Small details need meticulous checking and testing for high-resolution output recheck images for clarity and color. Double-check fonts are embedded or outlined correctly. Verify the format, bleed allowance, and crop marks are all present and correct. Sometimes you might even request color separations to check each ink plate individually.
What's a common problem found at proofing?
One very common problem is noticing differences in the typographic color and the perceived weight of the text type between what you saw on your desktop laser or inkjet proof and what comes off the final lithographic press. The way ink sits on paper can make type look slightly heavier or lighter.
So a desktop proof isn't fully accurate?
Your desktop printer only gives you an indication, a proof for layout and content checking. It's not truly accurate for color or final typographic texture compared to litho. For checking text type appearance, using a black-only toner laser printer at a very high resolution, like 2400 dpi or above if possible, can give you a more accurate sense of sharpness and weight than a lower-res inkjet might. Desktop printers also sometimes interpolate font data differently to make things look good on screen or at lower resolutions, but the final high-res production RIP may interpret the font data slightly differently.
So attention to detail right to the end.
Absolutely. It requires meticulous attention until the very end because, as they say, the job's not over till it's over. Mistakes caught at this stage save a lot of time, money, and disappointment later.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the silent architects, typography. We've really embarked on an incredible journey, haven't we? Moving from its subtle, often completely invisible presence in our daily lives to the intricate details of its measurement, its meticulous planning, complex production processes, and that precise fine-tuning we just covered. We've seen how choosing a font is far, far more than just picking a pretty shape.
Oh, absolutely. It's a foundational decision that gives a text its very voice and accent, its personality.
You, the listener, now have the tools and hopefully the awareness to start truly seeing typography all around you, to question its choices, to understand the immense craft that goes into making it work well.
And to recognize that typography isn't just about making things look good, although that's part of it. It's fundamentally about making them work functionally and making them communicate effectively, guiding the reader's eye and influencing their perception, often without them even realizing it's happening.
As we've discussed throughout, typography takes time to master. It's definitely a lifelong practice.
It really is. But once you're bitten by the typographic bug, as the saying goes, you'll find it impossible to ignore those details anymore. It's a discipline of incredible depth, constantly evolving with technology, yet somehow rooted in enduring principles that have shaped communication for centuries.
We've seen how every single choice, from the kerning between two letters to an entire page's grid structure, contributes to the clarity, the usability, and the overall effectiveness of a message.
So perhaps a provocative thought to leave you with. We touched upon the considerations inherent in design, where decisions about clarity, appropriateness, and impact shape how we understand the world.
So the next time you encounter type, whether it's on a massive billboard, in a favorite book, or just scrolling on your phone screen, maybe ask yourself, beyond simply conveying the literal information, what else is this typography communicating subliminally? And perhaps, what responsibility does its designer bear for that subtle message?
That's a great question. This invisible art truly does shape our world, one beautifully or perhaps poorly arranged word at a time.